Hi, everybody. Welcome to Deep Dive. I'm Carrie Hill with Local University, and I'm super excited to have Brandon Schmidt with me from YDOP, not YDOP, YDOP. And you guys are located in Philly?
Philly suburbs,
Philly,
Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Lancaster.
So,
That's right.
yeah. So we got all the Amish rolling around here.
Right, right. Very cool. And you're the director of digital strategy there, and you're dangling your toes in the R&D department. We were talking in the pre-talk about that, which was one of my favorite parts of agency life for sure. And it's my favorite part of not agency life as well. I spend too much time on it.
Yeah.
So this deep dive kind of came about. The impetus was it because of an article that you wrote for Local U about kind of writing and repurposing Q&A content, which I think is super hot right now. Really valuable, not only for search engines to grab, but for users as well, which I think is really neat. I think content creation keeps evolving, and I was talking on Twitter with some people. I've two clients I've given them a moratorium on blog posts. I'm like, stop writing blog posts and fix some of the old stuff you have on your site and make it better and more useful and more
Mhm.
evergreen and updated and nice. And I think FAQ content is a really big part of that.
Mhm.
I think we're with the new kind of FAQ markup, we're looking at it in a different light. It's different than it used to be. It used to be, oh, that's the
Absolutely.
FAQ page, right?
Yeah.
So what kind of started you down the path of kind of thinking about Q&A and repurposing it?
Yeah. So, like you said, the FAQ page schema is all the rage right now.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's talking about it because Google is allowing us to get a lot more content visible on the SERP. But at our agency, we've been talking about FAQ content for years. I
Mm-hmm.
started out as a content writer here at WideOp, and we had always figured that the questions that our clients are answering on a daily basis,
Mm-hmm.
that's like the best start and the best source of content ideas for the website. And if you can answer some of those questions, you can really set yourself apart and you can create more informed customers. The people are looking for these answers, and if you're not going to give it, then someone else will. And so we figured, let's start to give those things. Yeah, the FAQ page is always going to be a popular way to do it, but there's other ways to do it. Video FAQs, or just kind of answering those questions on a service page or a location page, or
For sure.
something like that. Is you're still giving them what they are looking for, and if you can do it in a variety of ways on your site, or as I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned in the article, on the Google business listing, I think you're really going to win.
One of my favorite ways of adding and marking up FAQ content is to actually put it on the page that's related to the question. So,
Mhm.
for example, plumbing, HVAC plumbing contractor, you could have one whole page of FAQs, or you could have a page of plumbing, a page of heating, and a page
Mhm.
of air conditioning, or you could add those FAQs to the page all about their plumbing services or
Mhm.
specific plumbing services, and it just enhances the usability and the relevance of that content on that specific page that you want to rank. Like, I guess I'd
Absolutely.
be okay if a user landed on the FAQ page and then I had to convert them some
Mhm.
way, whether it's via a phone number, a form, or something on that page. But if they needed a hot water heater and they saw, some FAQ content in a SERP, or they landed on a page about hot water heaters and I could answer all their questions right there, and I've got my phone number and a form right there on the page for them to fill out, I think that's a way better user experience than getting them on this question answer page that then you have to move them into your funnel. That's like one extra step we don't want them to have to take.
Yeah, yeah. I also think that different types of questions and answers have have different roles on the website. So if
Sure.
it's higher up in the funnel, you might have your sales page or your, service
Hmm.
or, information page. You have those questions on there. But if it's more of a, customer question or what makes us different
Hmm.
than our competitors, then, you might have a different page for that. It might be an actual sales page, or it might be the
Sure.
FAQ page.
I never
So,
thought of that. Have you ever marked up those sales questions? Like, why should you hire X? And here's the answer. That'd be interesting. I don't know what it would
um,
do, but it'd be interesting.
yeah, yeah. So we're still kind of getting the FAQ schema markup out to all of our clients. So
Hmm.
we still haven't marked up everything. One client that we have seen a lot of success for in FAQ in general, one of my favorite clients, mainly because they're just awesome. They move houses and
Hmm.
buildings. They just pick
Oh,
them up
nice.
and move them somewhere else. Just
Right.
really visual and awesome. And a lot of people have questions on, well, how do you do that?
Hmm.
And how much does it cost? And how do you actually do this? And
Hmm.
so we have created an entire section on their website that is way better than just an FAQ page. It
Sure.
becomes a whole FAQ section, and you can include video in that. You can also include, here's how we are different than our competitors. Our competitors
Hmm.
use this outdated technology, and we invented this technology to make it a lot more efficient, and you're never going to have any issues. So I think you might not always say the words like how we are different than our competitors, but if
Right.
people are comparing two websites or two different companies, and
Right.
you're giving it a lot more detail as what makes you different, it helps them make the decision.
Not only that, I think if you're really detailed about your descriptions of how you do things and why you do them that way, um, it becomes almost like that extra piece that explains the price point. Like, I would pay more for a product or a service if I understood exactly what you're going to do versus a competitor that's like, yeah, we'll move that house, it'll be XYZ, but they don't give me any details. I want to know, like, do I have to pack everything in my house up and move it out, or
Yeah,
can you just pick it up and move it? Or like, how does it
yeah,
work? So I'd
yeah,
pay more if I knew more, right?
yeah. Absolutely. And that is by far, we have a lot of clients, and we're always asking these questions. What is your sales team answering? What are your
Hmm.
customer service? What's your receptionist? What are those
Yep.
questions that they always answer? And so we want to write that content, and we also bring some content ideas to our clients. And one of those
Hmm.
things that always is a touchy subject is the idea of price,
Yep.
because they don't want to publish the price on there,
Hmm.
and yet there's still content that can be written about it. In the instance of the company that moves houses and
Hmm.
buildings, everything is custom because every building's different and every
Sure.
structure is different and the path and all. But
Hmm.
yet they rank number one for house moving cost because and those related terms, because we've written content about what goes into pricing that. So
Right.
if you're a plumber, you may not want to get into a price war with your competitors or let your competitors know what your pricing is. But if you
Hmm.
explain, like, here's the types of things that we can do, and here's the pricing structure for that, or you explain, the reason why other places are a little cheaper is because they subcontract, or because
Yeah.
they they're cutting corners in some way, and so
Hmm.
you highlight your difference, which again justifies
Right.
maybe a different price
Create
point.
those content value propositions so that the price point isn't quite, the
Hmm.
price point becomes not as much of the focus. The service or the product you're getting for the price becomes the focus, I think.
Absolutely.
I encourage my clients that don't want to publish their pricing, so give a range, or give a, like, put it on the dollar sign scale. Are you $1 sign, or are you $4 signs? Like, just give
Yeah, yeah,
people a some gut feeling indication. It might be completely wrong because they don't know, but at least give them some idea of what to expect when they call you. So they have a thing in their mind that says, "Oh, this isn't going to be that expensive." And you call them and say, "So how much does it cost for a new hot water heater?" And they come look at you
hmm
like, "Oh, that's $4,000." And you're like,
yep,
but a hot water heater is like, $700 at Lowe's. Like,
yeah, yeah,
so I think I think using that content to set that
Mhm.
expectation before you even talk to them as they're moving into
Yeah.
your funnel is
Yeah.
a super great way to use Q&A content for
Yep.
sure.
And one more thing on the pricing,
Yeah.
we've seen a lot of success with. We work with clients that do home remodeling or
Mhm.
some sort of home renovation, and if we have content on their site about like a product gallery or project gallery or
Mhm.
featured projects, we'll have them put a range on there. So we have
Sure.
one client that builds decks, and we describe everything that goes into this specific deck and the roof that they put on and the material and all, and
Mhm.
we say a project like this costs X number of dollars,
Yep.
so that they can start selecting, oh, I want that type of project. Oh, I'm starting to
Mhm.
budget in my head how much it's going to cost.
That's a great point. Like use those past projects to set pricing expectation for future projects. And everybody's going to have yeah, I don't want stairs there. I want them over here. Okay, that changes the price a little bit.
Mhm.
My house is shaped different, so that's going to change the price. And people understand that, but if they feel so much better about contacting our clients or reaching out because they have some idea of what they're going to be told, and that doubt talk in the back of their head, like, oh, you can't have that, that's too expensive.
Yeah,
You want to stop that so that they at least reach out and you can have a conversation with them. I think that's great.
absolutely.
So the article talks about FAQ content, and of course we've talked
Mhm.
about putting it on your website,
Mhm.
answering question and answer FAQs,
Mhm.
putting them in your Google My Business question or Google Business Listing question and answers, which I think
Mhm.
is great. And a lot of people are not seeding and answering their own questions in there. And
Yeah.
I think that's so important, especially now that they have the suggested answers. Like when you start typing a question,
Yes.
they're
Yes.
suggesting answers.
Yep.
I think if you can cut that conversation off and just say, yep, we have an answer for that, super great way to
Mhm.
repurpose your FAQ content.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. And now that that suggested answer is also pulling in Google posts and reviews, you kind of want to help guide the conversation in all those different platforms. So
Mm-hmm.
if I would recommend that if you do seed with some of the questions for the Q&A platform,
Mm-hmm.
you also create some posts around it so that you're kind of highlighting in a few different ways what makes you different and why people should choose you.
Do you think, I haven't really talked to anybody about this, and I'm not sure it makes that big a difference, but so you have
Mm-hmm.
FAQ content on your website. There's a question and an
Mm-hmm.
answer, right? If
Mm-hmm.
you seed that question into your Google business profile, question and answer, and the same question and answer in your Google post, is that all duplicate content or does Google not care about that? What do you think?
That's an interesting test. It sounds like, yeah. And if it is duplicate content, which would Google value most?
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
So if you had a Q&A that was a question answer and a post that was a question answer, what would
Yeah.
come up in that suggested answer first, the Q&A or the post? Or
Yeah.
would it swap back and forth? Or I mean,
Yeah.
that's an interesting test. That's something I'd be interested to see if there's any benefit to make writing that all unique,
Hmm.
or if you could just write it once and copy and paste it into multiple
Right.
places. I think that would be really valuable for clients that do their own, for sure, that aren't
Yeah, definitely.
writers, that don't want to rewrite the same thing over and over again.
Hmm.
That's something we'll have to test. We'll have to test
Yeah. Yeah,
that.
I do think though that when I'm thinking of frequently asked questions sections on a
Hmm.
website or even the Q&A,
Hmm.
I think there's I think on GMB it's a little different, but the idea behind like you want to lead them to the next step, guide them
Hmm.
to the next step. So if you have an FAQ page, I would never want the answer to just be yes, we have it, or yes, we do this. You want to
Right.
explain yourself a little bit and hopefully send a link to a relevant page or a contact page,
Right.
whatever that next
Like
logical step
a
is.
vague description that then links to a more detailed description on the next step page or something like that, where you kind of lead
Yeah.
them into the funnel, not just
Hmm.
give them all the 411 right there and then now what do you want me to do?
Yeah. It's kind of like with like featured snippets. You don't want it just to be answered right there. You want to have enough so to actually send them to your site. So on the
Right.
FAQ, marking up it with schema, you can include links in there. So,
Hmm.
I would want to include, some information that gives enough of a satisfactory answer so that they want to click on it, but then, send them to a link to send them to another page where they can get even more information or actually, sign
Right.
up or, contact you.
Have you done the markup? So you can do FAQ schema, so
Mhm.
multiple question and answers on one page, or
Yeah.
but you can also do the question and answer where it's one question with multiple answers on a page. Have you done both of those? Have you done one that links to the other?
Yeah, we have not done the second one,
Hmm.
mainly because of the types of clients we have.
Sure.
Either not enough traffic, or we just don't have that set up. Because
Hmm.
I'm pretty certain that Google's guidelines mean that they're saying that the answers need to be user generated answers.
Right.
Kind of like a Quora type of
Yep.
thing.
Or Stack Overflow
Stack.
or something
Yeah.
like that. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Interesting. I was just curious if there was any kind of
Mm.
way you could create FAQ, but then link that to a more in-depth question and answer page. I guess you could and have it be user-generated answers, but it would have to be, like you said, a big traffic site, or it just wouldn't be worth
Hmm.
the effort. You'd have to
Yeah.
have a lot of people submitting answers to make it worthwhile, I'd imagine.
Yeah. So I mean, if you have a website that has a community aspect to it, then
Hmm.
that could be an option.
Interesting, interesting. So, okay, we've talked about posts, we've
Mm.
talked about Q&A, we've talked about FAQ pages. You talked a little bit about video.
Mhm.
You were talking about the house moving client. I bet that would be a really powerful kind of video FAQ opportunity there.
Yeah, it's a very visual thing, especially with time lapse.
Yeah.
Kind of seeing, because some of these structures are, 500 tons, and they're just rotating them and moving them down the street, and it's very cool.
So I grew up in northern Minnesota, and when I was a little girl, I'm talking four maybe, my grandpa moved a house, like a big 2-story big house
Yeah.
from Aiken to Merrifield, which is like 30 miles. I mean, can you
Mhm.
imagine if back in this like
Yeah.
late 70s, this great big house down the road? They had to like
Yeah.
have people come lift power lines as they went down
Yeah.
the road. It was like this big process. I can you imagine having like vintage video of that you could like show the differences? That'd be so cool. But anyway,
It would
that just
be.
brought
It would
brought that to my mind thinking about the
be.
visual aspect of that
Mhm.
content. That'd be pretty cool. And
Mhm.
and another thing you mentioned in the article was reviews. Tell me how you
Mhm.
could kind of bring your FAQ into review or Q&A into reviews.
Yeah, so I think it's a smaller part to play than
Hmm.
some of these other ones. There's definitely a lot more opportunities there, but I think if you're asking for reviews and if you're prompting people for reviews, you can kind of say, how was your service, or how would you think about this type of treatment, or this,
Right.
your team, people tend to start answering those things. Like, I wasn't sure how my experience was going to be, and then I hired them and it was a great experience.
Hmm.
So I think there's some ways you might be able to prompt them a little bit, so that when it shows up, because if you're searching on GMB and you do the Google is going to bring up the suggested answers, and
Yep.
reviews will show up in there. So
Right.
yeah,
So
so
if
I
you
think
if
the
you talk to them in the language you want them to parrot back in their review, so you can
Mhm.
say, instead of saying, "Hey, can you give us a review?" you can say, "Hey, can you review our plumbing services or hot water heater
Mhm.
repair service?" So that
Mhm.
they say back, "Joe came to replace my hot water heater," and that content shows up in the review. I think that's a great tactic.
Mhm.
Um, there's been a lot more talk about review content and relevance to query
Mhm.
within those reviews. And some people say it has no weight at all, and some people say it might have a little bit of weight. I think that whether it has any kind of ranking weight, I think that consumers who can relate to that review content, oh, these people had a really good experience with their hot
Hmm.
water heater repair, and I need my hot water heater repaired.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
connection, I think, helps kind of sell those businesses because people can put themselves in those shoes, right?
Absolutely, and I also think that this the review part is really important for physical businesses, brick and mortar locations, tourist
Sure.
destinations, sports stadiums. Places where people are going and want to know the information. Is it wheelchair accessible? Do they have free Wi-Fi? How's the parking? Is there free parking? Those are
Right.
things you can kind of bring out in those reviews, and that's the stuff that people are looking for. And if you can bring it out in the reviews, then it will show up.
Well, and if you need that kind of you can craft your ask
Yes,
to.
yes.
So we'd love to have a review or hear your thoughts on how parking was when you came to Coors Field for the
Hmm.
ball game, and people would say parking sucked. I had to park 8 blocks away because I was just at a ball game, so parking
$50. Yeah,
sucked.
yeah.
That was my experience. They better not send me that email. So,
Hmm.
but I'm saying you can craft, like I said, craft the ask so that you get the
Hmm.
information you're looking for back. I think that's a really valuable tactic that big agencies get, like the big guys, have the budget
Hmm.
that they can do all that, but
Hmm.
even small guys or people who don't have an agency can learn from that and say, if they're using a platform like Gather Up and they're
Hmm.
doing their own asks, they can craft their ask to say, hey, this is Sue in the office, and I'd really like to know how you felt about XYZ. And
Hmm.
can you share your thoughts with me? And they know Sue in the office because Sue answered the phone when they called, and they can create that personal experience that I think helps them over those giant chains where you're just a number and a cog in a wheel kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, definitely, definitely. And of course, these questions, by getting the answer, whether it's user generated content like reviews, or if
Mm-hmm.
it's, getting the answer from the sales team, from the customer service team, from,
Right.
the receptionist and all, it's giving a marketer, it's given an agency a little more insight into the business. So for us, we work a lot with a marketing manager or VP level or owner, depending on the size of the organization. And so sometimes we get like a filtered view or we have to get it translated through them. But if we're getting content and ideas and information from people that are at the front of the line, it
Yep.
gives me as a marketer a little more insight into what works and what doesn't work for that business. Of course, none of this can cover over a bad experience or
Right.
just bad customer service or just a bad company. So that's maybe some insights. If they're not willing to talk about the parking, it's because the parking's really bad, and maybe they just need to fix that. But
Right.
the questions that they're answering on a regular basis, that they're coming in contact with customers with, they already have the pitch, they already have it, they've
Mm-hmm.
practiced it hundreds and hundreds of times. If you can kind of boil down that essence and then distribute it on the different digital platforms, it's going to help.
Well, I think that's a really great, that's a good point. And I use that customer service kind of sales team also as kind of a source for keyword research. I've stopped doing like plug this keyword into this tool and it spits out this big list of keywords with these numbers that don't really
Mm-hmm.
mean anything kind of keyword
Mm-hmm.
research. I want to know when your customer calls and they ask for this thing, what do they call it? What do they ask
Mm-hmm.
for? What are the words they use? Like for example, I had a prospect call and she's like, I've optimized for all these terms, but I've noticed that my customers are calling and they're using outdated terminology that we aren't supposed to use anymore, but they don't know that the terminology is new and updated. So what do I do?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, you got to optimize for what they're looking for and
Yeah.
then hopefully educate them into the new terminology, but you're not going to have that opportunity if they can't find you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one example I love to use is my mother and father-in-law. They're passed now, but they were from the East Coast, New York City, Brockton, Massachusetts area,
Mm-hmm.
and they'd never heard of a hot water heater in their life. That was a boiler.
Yeah, yeah, yep,
And I'd never heard of a boiler. Like a boiler is a pan on a stove with some water in it. Right? No,
yep,
no idea. So I
yep.
think that, using the terminology that your customers are using is so important. And
Hmm.
sometimes that's not in a keyword tool. It's not what if you're talking to the VP level, they're talking in their world speak.
Hmm.
And you have to talk to the customer service and the salespeople so that you can get the right vocabulary to put on the website for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely, and then that determines based on the location. So
Yeah.
if you are a marketing company or agency that works exclusively with plumbers, you have to be able
Mhm.
to highlight the different terminology in the different locations that you're serving.
Well, and who's their base audience, right? If their
Yeah.
area is predominantly older people or baby boomers or older, they're probably going to use older terminology for
Hmm.
things than the younger millennial kind of new homeowner crowd is going to use. So, there's
Yeah.
so many pieces that can play into keyword research. I think tools kind of only give us half the story. You got to talk to
Hmm.
the people on the ground.
Hmm.
So I think that combining that what you know about those keywords and using that resource of your customer service, your phone, whoever answers the phone, the sales
Hmm.
team, and what are people asking for, and how
Yeah.
can I turn that into content that targets them?
Yeah.
I think that's a great process to go through to create this Q&A content in various formats.
Yeah, yeah, and
Awesome.
that kind of helps map the user journey. So
Hmm.
if someone's searching for boiler and you kind of can direct them, or if they're using outdated terminology for anything really,
Hmm.
if you're directing them from that, you can follow the script that the sales staff uses to say,
Hmm.
okay, so this is what you're looking for, but did you know
Right.
that there's a newer version of that? Whatever the model or brand or whatever, there's a newer version of that, and here's why it's a lot better.
Right, for sure. Well, awesome. I
Mhm.
think we'll wrap it up. We're almost at 30 minutes already. Time goes so fast when we
Okay.
do these.
And we hardly nerded out over
I
schema.
know. I
So
didn't even get to go all schema nerd on you.
yeah, yeah.
Thank you for joining me so much,
My
Brandon. I really
pleasure.
appreciate you coming on Deep Dive with me.
Yeah.
If you haven't already read the article, we'll definitely link it from this post. It's great content if you're a small business marketer, if you're a small business owner doing your own marketing, if you're an agency that's looking for a great process to handle Q&A and FAQ. Brandon's laid it all out for you right there. So good luck and have a great rest of your week, Brandon. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks. Have a good day.